The claim that I am responding to today is that it is more beneficial for schools to keep their physical education classes than to cut them. My opponent's secondary claims are that 1, students who stay active do better in school, 2, that physical education classes will cure our nation's health problems, and 3, exercising has been shown to increase happiness. I am here to prove that all secondary claims either lack evidential support or logical reasoning, which leads me to conclude my opponent's argument is insufficient and the major claims should be rejected. My opponent's first secondary claim is that students who stay active do better in school. His main source of evidence comes from the Science Daily article, which was published in January of 2009. The article claimed that the odds of passing both standardized math and science test scores increased as the number of fitness tests increased. In the Science Daily article, there was no information about who or how these studies were conducted. Without this vital information, we cannot accept that the improved standardized test scores were directly caused by an increase in physical activity. There are a variety of factors that could have contributed to better test scores, such as an increase in parental support and involvement in their child's education. In 2013, an article was published in Capping magazine, which looked at a school district in Dallas that opened an outreach program for parents. The district found that proficient scores in science increased by 30%, and math scores increased by 16% in students whose parents participated in the outreach program. This is why there is no reason to accept that physically active students do better in school. My opponent's secondary claim is that physical education classes will cure our nation's health issues. The problem that my opponent is referring to is the growing issue of childhood obesity. As evidence to support this claim, my opponent simply states general statistics about obesity. He makes the assumption that physical education classes in school will address the problem. With the information my opponent has presented, it is impossible to determine the effect a school fitness program would have on the childhood obesity rate. Obesity is a complex issue, and it is going to take more than physical education classes at school to help contain the problem. In July of 2013, Harvard Medicine published an article stating physical activity alone won't solve the obesity epidemic. There are many factors, including nutrition and lifestyle choices, that must be addressed along with exercise to aid in fighting obesity. Therefore, physical education classes will not cure our nation's health problems. My opponent's third secondary claim is that exercise has been shown to increase happiness. My opponent supports his claim by stating several potential causes of happiness. Although he mentions physical education as a cause, there is no evidence to prove that exercising really has been shown to increase happiness. My opponent continues by claiming that happiness has a positive effect on our health. My opponent, this statement relies on us accepting that exercising causes happiness. Since there is no evidence to support that statement, the claim that happiness has a positive effect on our health becomes entirely irrelevant to the claim itself. We can then conclude that exercising has not been shown to increase happiness. It is clear that my opponent's argument is flawed. Not only does it lack evidence and reasoning to support the major claim, but also my opponent's lack of knowledge and research on the topic diminishes his credibility as an effective speaker. That being said, we cannot accept the claim that it is more beneficial for schools to keep their education classes than to cut them. Thank you.
Okay, the structural issues are all easy to follow. You did a good job labeling as you went along. Your general approach is to challenge the evidence and the reasoning that are presented by the advocate. On the first point, you basically say that there's not enough information in the research that the advocate cited. It doesn't specify what the confidence level was. And I thought that you did a good thing by offering some potential counter-causalities. You give us a general piece of information that talks about how difficult it is to focus on just one thing, and you also had an example of how other things are likely to have affected test scores, because I don't know that there's overlap between the schools that got physical activity and have this outreach operation, but the notion that that's the only way to achieve that objective, I think that's responded to pretty well. The notion that there is a relationship, I think there's still some sense that there might be a relationship. I think your argument is basically that it's not really a causal relationship, and I think that that's a good press on that point. I thought the second response on the health issues was a lot stronger. You did basically the same thing, arguing that the advocate's evidence is insufficient to address how physical education is going to address this, how much physical education would be required, what the programs would be like to be able to have any impact. And then you had a good counterclaim that said, look, there's a lot of stuff that goes into obesity. It's not just how much exercise you get. And you gave us a litany of ideas that might have contributed to this, suggesting that having an extra hour of PE a day is probably not likely to overcome those things. I thought that was okay. The happiness issue, mostly it's just presses. You didn't have any of the contradictory evidence on this point or any other counter-causality. I do think that you make a good argument that says that the advocate's evidence doesn't really support this claim. Your argument is that there really wasn't any evidence on that particular point. This will be easier to assess when we're in a debate, and we'll have heard the argument just a moment before, as opposed to 2.5 weeks ago, where our recall of it is likely to be a little bit hazy. But you seem pretty confident that there wasn't any information on that point. It seems to me like this would have been another one of those things where you could have found a generic piece of information that talks about all the factors of happiness, and go back to the notion that physical activity and exercise is not necessarily going to lead to that outcome. In fact, if you had some counterexamples of people who exercise and get frustrated because they're not able to improve their health as a consequence, I think that might be a good way to attack that argument as well. All right, thank you.